Alrighty. So welcome to Set the Bar for Team Engagement. I am Sarah Adji and I am here with James Bryden. Today we are looking at whether vulnerability has a place in the workplace. So James, welcome. Thank you from the Productivity Coach.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Great.
Yeah.
So let's start. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Okay. Right. Well, my current role, which I've been in for quite some years now, I'm a managing partner with Harrison Assessments. We do behavioural profiling for recruitment, engagement, employee development, executive development, teamwork, that sort of thing. So it's varied and interesting. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So you do with lots of people and all their different bits and pieces and quirks and personalities and all that fun stuff.
Sure, and all sorts of different businesses as well, you know. I mean, yeah.
Great.
For sure.
So good. So you recently opened up the conversation around vulnerability. Not necessarily a quick topic for people to discuss and jump into. So brave move there, and I love it because vulnerability is so important. So what do you mean when you talk about vulnerability?
Okay, well, vulnerability is, I guess, it's a willingness to put yourself in a situation where you may be judged or criticized, you know, and being open to accepting that criticism, and doing it anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. I first came across it with I was listening to a broadcast by Brené Brown some years ago. Yeah. She talks a lot about that.
Yeah.
And I found that first of all, that you know, and I'm generalizing here, of course, but women tend to be much more open to this sort of stuff. So they talk to each other, they tell each other their problems and what have you. Men don't do that generally. They talk about the footy instead. They'll talk about anything but that which is really personal. and I think it's to their detriment, to be honest.
Yeah.
They think vulnerability is weakness.
Yes, I was just about to ask around that. So most people do see vulnerability as being weak because it's that emotional space and people don't like bringing in emotions. So what are your thoughts around that, around vulnerability and weakness?
Weakness. Well, again, I realised that it is actually a strength. Okay, because what it does do is when you're willing to share those sorts of feelings, if you like, with others and open yourself to criticism, have a voice and an opinion that might be contrary to what other people think, actually helps you build resilience. You know, it makes you stronger. It doesn't make you weaker. And that was a big eye opener for me, to be honest. To say, well, it's okay. You know, big boys don't cry. Well, I've got news for you. They do.
Big boys should cry?
Well, where appropriate, yeah. That's. I don't have an issue with it at all.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how you say that because it's almost women in business. There's this thought that when our emotions come into play, and it can be this stigma around big girls shouldn't cry. Professional girls shouldn't cry. So vulnerability in the workplace, not necessarily saying we have to be teary and cry in all these spaces. So how is it a strength, and when did you realise that it was a strength?
Well, I guess probably the biggest, and this happened in hindsight, I realised this when I listened to Brené Brown. I mean, I took on a job funny enough, in Indonesia, which I think I told you about before. You know, I was offered a fairly high-profile position over there, never having lived in the country, not knowing the language, and coming into an environment that was totally foreign. I was offered a job, and you know, I took it. It was scary, and it was even scarier when I got there. But you know what? I did it anyway. It's probably the most stressful time in my life, but I got through it, and I actually came out stronger as a result.
Yeah.
So, and then looking at that, so if I hadn't been willing to do that, you know, too many of us, what we do is how can I put this? we try to keep ourselves safe.
Yep.
Safe from criticism, from violence, from whatever. And, you know, we end up in this little cocoon that we create around ourselves. And this will keep us safe.
Yeah.
Well, I've got news for you. It doesn't. It does the exact opposite. It stops you from growing.
Yes.
It stops you from building strength. It makes you weaker. It does the exact opposite of what you think it might do.
Yeah.
Some people live their whole lives like that.
Mm.
And I find that tremendously sad that people limit themselves in that way. When at the end of the day, all they're dealing with is a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
This doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel nice. But you know what? How many people die from just having a bad feeling? I don't know anybody.
Not many.
Probably die of embarrassment. You can't.
So what would you say, in what ways does it strengthen us? So when we put ourselves in a place where it's uncomfortable and it's hard, and we may get judged and may get criticism, what strength comes out of that?
Well, first of all, it's that realization that nothing actually bad happens. What often happens is that when you do that and you stand up for yourself, or whatever form that takes, people don't generally laugh at you or criticize you. They actually respect you, you know, for being willing to do that.
Yeah.
And what does that do? It builds your confidence. You feel more confident next time, more able to do something bigger and better.
Yeah. It's that putting into practice and getting that airtime, and then you can build on that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, correct. That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah.
I don't claim to hold it.
Yeah. So you talked about your experience.
No.
Yeah. So you talked about your experience in Indonesia and having to be vulnerable and step into a space that was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Was there any times where it didn't quite work out? Like where maybe not in Indonesia, but any times that you've experienced where you've put yourself out there and you've been vulnerable and either allowed those emotions to be discussed or to experience those emotions. Has there been a time where it hasn't quite gone the way that you've hoped, and what did you learn from that?
For sure things don't work out sometimes, but I'm willing for that to happen. That's the point. Is, am I willing for things to have a go? The worst that can happen is it doesn't work. And what happens as a result of that? You learn.
Yes, that's
you
right.
learn what doesn't work. Next time that situation comes up, you adjust.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of that process of making you stronger, making you more resilient.
Yeah.
You know, and that's you know, doing things like interviews. You know, talking in front of groups.
Yes.
You know, in front of a number of people, or 20 or 30 or 100 or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, you do it anyway.
Yes.
And
you develop that bounce back, like when things don't quite go the way that you want, you can bounce back from that and learn and adjust and tweak the way you do things so that you can be more successful the next time.
For sure. And of course, that imposter syndrome tends to sit sometimes there as well. So people will find out that I don't really know. I'm not really as good as they think I am. Oh, really? Okay. So what does that do? What it does for me is it makes me prepare better. Yes. It makes me, you know, take the time to make sure that I'm doing is actually a good thing. Yeah, and it comes across well. Yeah. And then when you get out, a little bit nervous to start with, and then when you start talking, and you get the response, and you know, and then the confidence grows, and it just gets easier and easier each time. So yeah, it's
sometimes taking that first step and rolling into it.
Yes, yeah. You know, what's the old saying? The first pancake is always lumpy.
I haven't heard that one.
so yeah. So I'll give it a go anyway.
Well, we've got to be bad at something before we can be good at something, right? It's common in the stuff that we get taught. Is you've got to put yourself out there, do the best you can, and learn and grow. And you've got to be bad at it before you can be good at it. So yeah, first pancake's always lumpy. I love that.
Yeah, and to embrace that uncertainty that comes with that.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen, but how I'm going to find out.
Good. That's great. So when is being vulnerable inappropriate? So vulnerability is great, but it's not always appropriate. So when do
For a leader.
how do we know? Yeah, for a leader.
For a leader. Okay, when decisive action is needed. Sometimes there's times to be vulnerable. There's times to be partly vulnerable and making decisions. And there's times where you just got to say, right, enough. This is what we're doing. And again, people will see that you've got that ability to move between the two.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, that builds respect, I think, for you as a leader. Yeah. Okay. Because I know you've got the strength. And that sort of proves it. You know, here I am, bang, done.
Yeah.
And of course, in that vulnerability as a leader is being willing to admit that you don't know everything.
Yes.
And asking your team, guys, I'm not quite sure what to do here. What do you reckon?
It's great.
What do you think that does to your team?
Gets them on board.
Hey, the chest puffs out, and you take on an idea from them.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, this is a guy I want to follow.
Yeah. And so I guess it smashes that. I think there's been this mindset that when you admit that you don't know, that people will go, oh, they don't know, don't want to go there, but it actually achieves the opposite. When we're willing to admit that we don't have all the answers, we are just as human as you, let's do this together. Right. It actually builds that connection, it builds that strength of relationship as well with your team, and they do want to follow you because you're real.
Yeah. And if I've got someone who's really capable in my team, I want to lift them.
Absolutely.
Some people will push them down because they think it might make them look bad. No. You're building them up. It makes your team look better, and in results, you look better as a result. Yes. You don't do it in order to make yourself look good to everybody. You're doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And again, it shows the other people in the team, hey, this guy's willing to make this happen. Yeah. How good is that? So
good. I love that. So as a team member, how does that play out as a team member? When should we be vulnerable in front of our leaders and our colleagues?
Anytime that you feel the need. And it's situational, of course. You've got a personal situation at home. Sometimes then, some of it's not appropriate to discuss with certain people. Yeah. But to sort of say, look, I'm having troubles here, or I've got a problem here. It's not a whine, it's not a complaint. It's just, this is how it is, and can you help? Yeah. People are happy to help others if you ask them. Yeah, yeah. Being willing to ask for help. That's hard when we're leaders, when we're part of a team, especially when the team's really capable. If you feel part of a team and you see everybody's kind of appears to have everything all together, it can be hard to then say, okay, I need help. But what that sometimes does is actually opens up the conversation. It does. It does. Which is a good thing. Yeah. And of course, one needs to make sure that all the accountabilities are being met, all the KPIs or whatever you want to call them are being met. Yeah. Okay, that all has to be managed, of course. But in the context of what we're talking about, then yeah. So love it. There you go. It's all about balance, right? It's that understanding when vulnerability is appropriate, when it's not, when we need to just make those decisions, and when we need to get people on board, and that, I think, is what takes time. And that's the kind of that putting yourself out there when you're not quite sure, and that's when you learn how to use vulnerability in an effective way. Yeah, and as a manager with your team, it's giving people space to do that. Yeah. And making sure that they know that you're there for them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So good. This is all so good, and I'm sure that we could talk for hours, but we're not going to do that because you're right. not fun for everybody to sit here and listen to our conversation. But we could do it again. We could